I haven't been able to buy any yet. It was so expensive last year. My trees did so well without it. I'll go again without it. If you put the wrong fertilizer on it, it can make it worse. That's what they say.
Yes, absolutely. All right, it's 6:30. Good evening. I'm John Krugerberg. I'm the chair of the planning board meeting, and I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. We have an agenda in front of us. The first order is calling the meeting to order, and second is a roll call of members. Present is John Ranlett, John Kelly, Mike Ahern, Rhonda Bishop, Bert Sutcliffe, our town planner. Absent in terms of a regularly sitting member is Paul Wilson, but present is Jack Scarborough, an alternate, and Bob Dragon, an alternate. Seeing that Mr. Dragon was an alternate at the last meeting, I'll appoint Jack Scarborough a voting member for this meeting. Item number 3 on our agenda is public comments. Does anybody have any comments they'd like to make to the board on an item not in front of us today? Hearing none, we'll move on to item number 4, administrative matters, which is the only item is to review our minutes of May 21st, 2009. It's the shortest minutes I think we've had. So. Yeah. We'll give everybody a second to pull it out. Anybody have any comments on the first page of the minutes? Any comments on the second page of the minutes? Member feels it's appropriate to approve these minutes, so I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Kelly and second by Mr. Scarborough. Any further discussion? Everyone in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? And that passes. Okay, moving on to item number 5, correspondence. I'll pass the microphone over to our planner.
All we had was a save the date flyer, and this is for the local government center, their annual conference, and this is November 18th through the 20th, Radisson Hotel in Manchester. So you can just mark your calendar if you're going to be interested and let me know. We could set up a carpool and get you registered.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 6 is new business. We have 2 items under this. The first is a site plan review, a discussion and a public hearing on a proposal from Lloyd Berry on behalf of Spear Memorial Hospital for demolition of an existing medical office building and parking lot reconstruction at 19 to 27 Avery Street. The town planner has given us a staff report, and our procedure is to see that everything is in order and then to accept the application as complete and then to move into a public hearing discussing the merits of the application and then take a vote for approval if that's appropriate. I'd like to welcome anybody from the hospital to address us with some preliminary comments, but I'd ask you to save any detailed facts until maybe we get into that phase of the meeting. Sure.
What the hospital is proposing to do is to tear down the Oliver Drug wing of the hospital. That wing extends out from this rendering up front here, so that would be removed, and a stairwell would be built where it connects to this entrance, and then we're going to be reconstructing the parking lots. There's 3 small little parking lots that we're reconstructing, then landscape.
Thank you. Why don't we see if there are any comments from the staff report and turn the microphone over to the planner?
The main concerns that the staff had, was stormwater drainage, what kind of impact this would have when you remove the building and you reconstruct a parking lot. And so we looked at that, and also the petitioner submitted stormwater drainage calculations. And based on the stormwater drainage calculations and the proposal, they're actually, when they remove the building, they're going to add landscaping, so they have less of an impact on their stormwater drainage. And we did look at their numbers, and it looks like it's going to have less of an impact than the building right now as it stands. The other concern we looked at was parking spaces, because our zoning ordinance, if you go above 125% of the requirement, then you need to get a special exception. So we wanted to make sure that they wouldn't have too much parking that it would require this special exception. So we got the numbers from the applicant, Spear Memorial Hospital, and the parking calculation will come out to 117% of the requirement, so it doesn't meet the 125% threshold that would require the special exception. So they were good on that. The last thing was they are talking about moving a dumpster over, and their plan does not show it being screened. So that's one thing that staff would like to recommend as a condition. We recommend that the application be accepted as complete because it was very complete. But we would like planning board to look at two conditions. One, that an escrow account be established for the engineer because he's actually already reviewed it, but he does need to be compensated for his review. So we need an escrow account established for the engineering review that already took place. And two, that the applicant adequately screen the new dumpster location from view with an opaque fence. I wrote down in the amended report that I gave everyone, I said pending the contracted town engineer's approval, but if you look at the communication, he has accepted it. So he had a number of concerns, and they've been going back and forth with the applicant, and they have been adequately addressed. So I'm taking away number 1 and just leaving 2 and 3, which would be a new number 1 and a new number 2.
Thank you. So I'd like to focus the board's attention on the first item as whether we feel the application is complete, and then I'd like us to act on that, and then if it is considered complete, I'd like us to move into a question phase for the applicant. Does anybody have any questions of the applicant or of any other member of the board concerning the completeness of this application? Would anybody like to make a motion that we accept this as a complete application?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Scarborough.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Ranlett. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of accepting this as a complete application, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have deemed that this is a complete application. Mr. Scott is actually the person who was speaking to us earlier. Is there any other introductions or points that you'd like to make to the board about this project, especially considering the planner's 2 recommendations?
There's a lighting plan I believe you haven't seen yet.
Yeah, actually, I did
You have that?
pass that out, the lighting plan. Correct.
Okay.
I guess I could have mentioned that. They are going to be adding some lighting, but we have asked them to make that dark sky compliant. So what I have passed out to you shows the type of lighting fixture that they want, and it is certified as dark sky compliant. And then also what I passed out to everyone was a photometric. And even though our ordinance doesn't specify photometric, what I've done in past towns that I've worked for has recommended that it not exceed 1 foot candle at the property line, and it looks like they're going to be able to comply with that. So we don't have a set standard of what they can't exceed by, but they did submit the photometric.
Just to bring your attention back to that, I have outlined the 1 foot candle limit of that new lighting. The darker line, and then the 2 foot candle is the brighter highlight that you see on the plan. And these are the individual light units in pink. There's additional units, lights on the northern lot, but since we're not making any real changes there, that lighting will remain as is.
When you say additional, you mean you're adding them, or they just already
These are
exist?
existing
Okay.
lamps that are just there. They weren't mapped for the photometrics.
You just mapped the new proposal.
There were some changes to the plan since the plan was submitted. If I can go over those changes.
Sure.
Please do.
So this is our proposed plan. Shows the Oliver building removed. There's a new stairwell that's highlighted, which will be a new structure. And there's also, this is the OB building, as we call it. And there's an entry here in the back that's going to have a vestibule brought forward so that there's a airlock closure. So that'll be a change to the building here. This will be a new walk coming around, and it would be at a 5% grade, so it would be handicap accessible without railings. And change that we're making, we're putting in a crosswalk through in between the existing pin oaks to provide access from these doors on the end of the OB building over to this parking lot. The other new thing is we added landscaping to this entry here, the circle walk that you can see before. And we rearranged the handicap striped areas. We had a van acceptable walking area, which is 8 feet wide. We reduced that to 4 feet wide, which is a more standard width for handicap. And we added that space down here for the walkway so that you have more space to get between the cars for this new walkway here. Those are the only changes that we made since you. What I wanted to just pass around, these are photos of the plant materials that we selected for the hospital. We're going to provide 4 ash trees where the Oliver Drug Building was. And we picked ashes because they're more salt tolerant than oaks and other maples, and provide a good canopy and grow fairly quickly. Right in front of the new facade, we're going to have Serbian spruce, which is a narrow spruce. That is going to be on the corner here, and also right in front of the if you look right here, there's a space between 2 canopies. This Serbian spruce would grow right up between that. And other shrubs, we've got rhododendrons and American viburnums. They're all photos there. There's a white birch tree with those plantings right over front here. And also, we're going to have some dogwoods, a variegated variety of dogwoods over here. To help lighten up that corner. It's kind of dark back in here. The variegation of the leaves will bring some light into that area. There will be also some rhododendrons and some yews out in front. These are where the bollards are. That will be following that pattern. And then all these little circles in here are all going to be daylily beds. And there's also daylily beds here and under the birch tree. The other change we're making to the front of the OB building right now, inside there's a handicap ramp to the door and then to a concrete landing and then to the asphalt. The architect would like to remove that interior ramp, and so we're going to raise this concrete landing up to meet the floor level so we don't have an interior ramp. And that ramp space becomes another airlock space without any ramps inside. So then we would have that concrete landing built higher with 2 steps down to an asphalt walk that is boxed in with a granite curb. So there'd be a step here. And then we revised the handicap access in the corner here. Right now, it's a little asphalt now it's just a little patch of asphalt with the curbing. You can see right here. We're going to widen that by moving this granite curbing and make more of a landing, and then a pad of concrete coming up to the existing concrete pad to be wider and more in keeping with the standards for ADA accessibility. There'll be a new parking lot built down below here to add to the south parking lot. There'll be 9 spaces in there. Right now, there's handicap spaces out here in front of the porte-cochere. Those handicap spaces will be removed and placed into the new lot. And the new lot will have a sidewalk at the back edge of it, which will tip down, pick up the handicap, and pitch back up. And those pitches will be in concrete. The ramp will be concrete, the walk's all asphalt. We felt the concrete change in material and color would help identify those slopes and make it a safer walk. In that stairwell, there's a small porch on the north side of that. and the walk will come up, this whole walk right through here from this entry to the middle parking lot is all at 5% grade, so that we have, again, accessibility without adding railings, and that'll provide access to the stairwell here. Now the dumpsters, which are located at the back of the middle lot, are all going to be removed. The one unit that's going to stay is an air conditioner unit that's in there. That already has 3 sides fenced. We'll add another side to that, the side that's where the dumpsters are now. We'll close in that space, and that will remain. And then the rest of that space would be sodded and become snow storage in the end. Those dumpsters are going to be moved down here. This grade really drops off. There's a new truck entry to the hospital on this end. This is Avery and Island on this end.
Right.
So we're going to tuck this dumpster, the 2 dumpsters and the compactor into that slope with a new retaining wall, a 7-foot high retaining wall. Above that 7-foot retaining wall will be a 4-foot chain link fence for safety. And then the 2 dumpsters will be facing in this direction, and the dumpster will be in the same direction that the trucks back down into that space. Now, there's a drop right in here, so the trucks come up the Highland and back into that space in the same way that the compactor truck will come and back into the new location for the compactor. Now, this is the location where you'd like to do some screening.
Right.
That we can add, a fence across the 2 dumpsters, and then again, do a L-shaped wooden gates so that we could screen those
Right.
in.
I was mainly looking at the screening because at that corner is a dental office, and I wanted to screen it from
Over
that.
here.
Yep,
Or over here.
There.
right there,
Yeah.
where your pen is.
Now, there is a screen wall for the loading dock right about here. There's an existing freestanding wall. It comes out about to that point.
Correct.
There is some screening from the front of the hospital in this direction.
Right, I was concerned about the
But
dental
it doesn't reach
office.
all the way forward, so
Yeah.
we can provide the additional gates on the dumpsters. Now, you talked about the drainage. This whole side over here is a decrease in runoff because we're increasing the green space and permeation into the ground. But over here, we're actually increasing impervious surfaces, but it's to such a small amount that it's considered negligible by us and by the consulting engineer for the town. In a 2-year storm, it's going to increase by 0.04 cubic feet per second. In a 10-year storm, it was going to increase by 0.08, and in a 25-year, well, that was a 25-year storm, and 0.06 for a 10-year storm. So all of that is within acceptable rates for the catchments that are there now, as well as a storm scepter, I believe, is on this side of the hospital. It has capacity for that increased runoff. We already covered the parking.
Thank you. Does any board member have any questions? Yes, Mr. Scarborough.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a little bit concerned about the overall impervious addition by this development and the impact that it will have on Pemigewasset. I'm responsible from Franconia to Franklin.
Right, so when you say overall, did you say that the net was actually a loss?
Right. It's still a loss. We're losing impervious surface out front here. The increase in impervious surface here is still less than what we're gaining for impervious ground and landscape areas on this side. So,
understanding that stormwater is one of the biggest concerns we've got for flow and pollution.
Pollution and flooding.
Yeah. So I just I'm not opposed to this, but just am concerned about the increase in impervious surface, because you're not only adding parking areas and asphalt, you're adding roofs which are impervious. So,
Well, part of the reason we're decreasing impervious surfaces is because we're moving that building.
understand. Yeah, yeah. Just wanted to make a point.
Mr. Dragon and then Mr. Kelly?
It appears from what the gentleman has gone over with us that the impact, Jack, would be very minimal, if any. And it's already offset with the areas that's impervious. So
A very
I don't know
good
if there's
plan.
any impact is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think it's a good question, but
It's a good
doesn't
plan. Good plan.
appear to be any real impact there. Thank you.
Mr. Kelly?
Just a couple of questions. Number one, does the planner have the new plans because they're completely different than this is?
Yeah, that's one of the questions I had too.
That's the,
Does the planner have plans like that instead of like what we've got in front of us?
no, I haven't submitted these plans with the small changes that I went
Oh.
over.
Okay,
Wait,
so-
wait, wait, if I can just clarify. The first page is existing condition, the second page should be the same as what he's got over there. The second page is proposal.
The existing condition is still.
So, yeah, the miniature is the same as your large size.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah, I think that was the
I'll take care of
confusion.
that. Dark sky lighting. Didn't Governor
Yes, Governor Lynch,
Lynch just signed?
Yes.
So we're, according to his new ideas?
right. So this will be, cutting edge, and it will fall into place with what the governor signed it today, and it's to go into place in 2 weeks, I think.
Okay. The other thing is, do we have a guarantee in all the landscaping and everything like that? I know, what's his name, Walmart had to guarantee their landscaping, which they paid 2 or 3 times for different trees and so forth.
Okay, to bond
Are
it?
they going to be guaranteeing this landscaping?
Well, that could be something the planning board could impose, but we don't have a landscape ordinance per se that requires it. If we had a landscape ordinance that said he had to put in so many trees, then I would require that he bond it, but our ordinance doesn't do that. It's,
So Walmart didn't have to really replant those trees? You didn't have that zoning, or is that?
well, I think
I just
Walmart,
want everything even, that's all.
yeah, I think Walmart, they approved the plan with that stipulation.
That's why I was wondering, should we,
Right. It's something that planning board could say. They could say, well, we want it with this landscape plan as submitted, and we want it bonded. I don't know.
I think it's a good idea. If one has to do it, the other has to do it. I'm a little confused when you were talking about the handicap ramp being built up, but something about 2 steps, something at the end of the ramp. When you first started.
Oh, this is over.
No, down in the front, I believe, you said that, yeah, right there.
Right up front, this is not a handicap accessible entry.
Oh, I thought it was at one time, because you said there was a ramp.
There's going to be a ramp right here,
Right,
and that will come around to this door or this door.
okay, but
Will
there's
be
no,
accessible, but this door will not.
there's no steps
There'll
there.
be 3 steps to get into this door.
Right, but where the handicap ramp is,
Right
there's no
here?
steps, right?
There's no steps here.
Oh.
That will be ramped.
The last question I have, I believe Cummings, where's Cummings Street according to that
Down
plan?
here.
Down here. And Highland Street's to the back,
This one, yeah.
and that's where your
Right here.
that's where your
Avery.
dumpsters are going to be.
Right off behind.
Thank you.
Mr. Dragon, you had your hand up again?
Beg pardon?
I thought I saw you raise your hand earlier, I'm sorry.
Yes, I did. Just a quick question, going back, John. On Walmart, didn't they have to replant some of the,
About 3 times.
and didn't the planning board at that time, when they accepted the conditions, that they plant certain species of trees or whatever?
But after they planted that type of tree, some of them died.
You're right.
They had to replant more trees.
As a member of the board here, I just feel that, the landscaping people can handle that all right. I don't know if we need to address that at this point.
There is a note on our landscape plan for a 1-year guarantee.
Okay.
Of the landscaping. That's on the plan already. And that's a standard industry practice that after one growing season, if there's anything declined, then the landscape has to come back to replace that.
One last thing is, birch trees are a very short-lived tree.
Which?
The birches usually are
Yeah,
very
yeah,
short-lived
more
trees.
ornamental.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
They'll last 25, 30 years usually.
I have a question on the landscaping. I seem to remember when Walmart or somebody was coming through that there was a list of vegetation that was considered invasive and should not be used in town.
Yeah.
Is that list, I'm just concerned about the Serbian tree, because that just sounds like it's not very native, although I'm not familiar with it
Well, maybe
myself.
you can address if that's a native.
Serbian spruce, I don't believe I've ever seen it on an invasive list.
Okay.
I don't recall that being one, but it's not native, but it's selected specifically for how narrow it is.
Okay.
And it has a nice graceful arching of the branches there.
You couldn't replace that with cedar trees because they're usually very small.
We could do some.
Mr. Scarborough?
I've seen that tree in Serbia, and it is invasive.
It's invasive in Serbia.
Yeah.
Well,
It's become invasive here that I know.
maybe,
That's right.
maybe one of the conditions of approval would be to make sure that any plants that are planted are not on the town's invasive
Yep.
species list. Are there any other questions for the applicant? Yes,
I've got
Mr.
one.
Sutcliffe.
On the existing south parking lot, there just south of the Oliver Drug Wing, there's some kind of an HVAC or generator, something right adjacent. I'm looking at your existing map here, was in our handout. Just wondering what it is and where it's going to end up when that becomes parking.
Right down here, you're talking?
Yeah, I can point it out to you here. I'm not sure.
No, this is not AC. These are manholes for buried storage tanks.
Okay.
There's a number of lids right along in here that are right in the pavement. Sort of, flat with the pavement there for the underground storage.
Okay.
Payments. There is, however, a pipe, a vent pipe for those tanks that comes up to the Oliver Drug, goes up the wall and up to the roof. That will have to be relocated. And it'll probably get relocated up somewhere in this corner of the new stairwell. But other than that, these are surface tanks, or underground tanks, and those are the covers.
So you know more questions at this moment from the board. I'd like to move this into a public hearing session. So at 6:58, I'll open up this meeting to the public. If there are any comments from anyone in the audience who would like to speak against this, please acknowledge yourself now.
Hi.
Yes.
My name is Michael Kilfoyle. I live at 60 Highland Street, right across from the hospital. And we went through the renovation process with the hospital 5 or 6 years ago. And I'm concerned about the dumpsters being moved to where they are in front of Highland Street. Highland Street's a mix of residential and commercial, which is part of its appeal. And right now, we have a view of that retaining wall where the trucks back in, which is noisy for us because they back in and drop their things off. And I'm very concerned about having a dumpster area there with new trucks coming in and doing that, along with the what we have an incessant hum of the air conditioner unit that's right across from our way as well. So I'm opposed to this. I understand the need for the parking and so forth, but the relocation of the dumpsters, for me, I'm opposed to that. And I just asked the board to consider the residents that are around the hospital in considering this plan so that, we're going to be affected as well, and we'd rather not have the dumpsters located there. Thank you.
Any other comments of a negative nature? Any comments of a positive nature? Any comments of a neutral nature? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at 7 o'clock and remove the discussion back to the board. Yes, Mr. Dragon.
Are we having a complete relocation of the dumpsters? I can't read all this small print here with my glasses. But this gentleman's question here I'm concerned about. We'll discontinue where they are now, and there'll be a new set location for the dumpsters. We have dumpsters up there now, am I correct?
Dumpsters are right here.
Existing.
That's right.
Those will be eliminated?
They're going to be relocated.
Well, but those there will be eliminated, and you'll be relocating the dumpsters. And that's where your question comes in, is that right, sir?
Yes, sir.
And that is going to be a visual,
We're concerned about both the visual and the noise impact because they'll have trucks backing up there, and we can hear them now across the street, so now we're adding more trucks.
I would just leave this as a suggestion. Maybe an on-site review might be applicable in this case, I don't know, on this issue.
Okay.
Just a thought.
Ms. Bishop?
My question is, how often is the dumpster going to be emptied? Once a week? Or how often?
The trash compactor gets emptied about 10 or 11 times a year, and the recycling dumpsters, they get emptied once a week.
That's a lot.
So about once a week.
Mr. Kelly?
What is the object of moving the dumpsters anyway?
Well, since we're removing this building, re-landscaping this whole area, it was hoped that we would, make this area more acceptable, beautified area. And most of utility loading area has now been moved to this new location, so the dumpsters and compactors is more appropriate located with the loading dock.
But wouldn't it be better if it's objectionable now, as I understand it, to the people along Highland Street. And right now you're going to aggravate the problem by doing that, and if just for the beauty on the side of that hospital, I would think that maybe just for public opinion it might be just as well, because if Highland Street is up on the back and Cummins Street's out on the front, what's on the sides? There's a hospital road probably.
This is Avery Street.
And that's Avery Street, right? So, and where's Hospital Drive or whatever?
Over here. On this side.
Okay. So, and that would be the side that there's very few people living on. Right? Yeah.
That's the side that was just all renovated.
That's a side where the dentist is and so forth.
The dentist over in the corner.
Mr. Kelly, the dentist is over here.
Huh? Is it? Oh, okay. No, it can't be. If that's Highland Street, that's not where that's not where John Reaver is.
No, he's back on the other.
He's back over there.
He's back over here.
Yeah.
Where the other parking lot is, and they got the drive up in here.
He's
right in
across
here.
from the hospital road.
Yeah.
And that's on the side of the hospital road.
Yeah, this is, here we have an aerial photograph that might help.
Yeah.
You can see.
But-
This is where the dumpsters are now.
Right.
This is Avery Street.
Yeah.
Highland Street's over here.
Yeah.
And this is where we'd like to put the dumpsters.
Yeah, and Reaver is over in there somewhere, isn't he?
Yes,
At the top.
He is right up here.
Yeah, okay. So why?
There was one other consideration that went into the decision of the moving of the dumpsters as well. With the renovation of this building, now we'll have a higher patient walking population going to here. This would be more patient parking lot, whereas this parking lot that we want to relocate it to is staff parking. So we felt that getting whatever truck traffic we could get out of the patient pedestrian walkways would be a safety advantage.
People pay good taxes and everything like that, and probably excess amount of taxes along Highland Street and so forth, and now you're just going to disrupt their lives that much more. I'm sure that if Walmart, to go back to that, if Walmart decided to do that, there'd be an uproar that you could hear halfway to the Mississippi. Again, I'd like to be even Steven with all these things and see if you couldn't possibly put it somewhere else.
That's important.
That wouldn't irritate the public anymore that's actually paying taxes to the town of Plymouth.
The planner?
If I could just clarify a little bit, you made it seem like it was right on Highland Street. There's a loading dock, so they're talking about putting it by the loading dock. So it's not on Highland Street, it's set back, but that's why I put in my recommendation to put opaque screening. So, if you can make sure the opaque screening goes along Highland Street and along on the other side, and
Visually, we can solve that with the fence.
right.
Gates.
And then in terms of the noise, it's a loading dock right now. So how often is that accessed? I mean, it's only going to increase it once a week with one other truck, but I'm assuming the loading docks you've already got traffic going there. So that's why when I went out to the site, it didn't look like it was a virgin area, and now all of a sudden they're putting a dumpster there. This is an area that's already, it's got 2 loading bays on it. And it's sort of set, it's got a different elevation to it. There's a retaining wall, so it's not...
We're tucking it into a wall,
Okay, so
a slope.
it's tucked into, and it's at a lower elevation, and it's in this loading area, so it's not, like as I said before, a virgin area that they're just sticking it in. It fits in with the loading.
All right, I'd like to ask Mr. Kilfoyle a question, and then Mr. Kelly can have the floor. I got thrown off just a little bit when you said that you already, if I heard you correctly, you already hear the air conditioning unit? Is that what you said?
Yes, we do.
But, and you live close to the air conditioning unit?
We live we live on Highland Street, right across from the parking lot as it exists right now. So
You own the big colonial there?
yes,
Okay.
yes. So that's where we hear the
Okay.
noise from.
All right, thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Well, the only problem I find on that is when a truck backs up to the loading dock, it backs up and they unload it with cardboard boxes and so forth. But if you ever heard one of those, and I can hear it way up on Ledgeside Lane, when those dumpsters come in at 6 o'clock in the morning and they start opening that thing up and those
Slams.
those doors start slamming.
I hear it every morning.
Man, I'm telling you, it'll wake you right up out of bed. So, it's different than, it's like sirens, going off. Well, maybe a car can come in and it's not making any noise. The siren takes off, then you wake right up. And the same idea with that. It's metal against metal, slapping the metal like this, And it's usually early in the morning, and whether it's once a week or whether it's, and it is 52 times out of the year. I just can't understand why they can't put it somewhere where it doesn't irritate the taxpayers that much more.
Okay, Mr. Dragon, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I would think a suggestion is to see if an alternate location would be feasible, and with expense in mind too, I'm sure, but I think the concerns of the taxpayers and the people in the town on something that, whether it's a hospital or a commercial business or whatever, I think their concerns should be addressed in a reasonable manner. And if it's possible, I think it would be nice to see if there is some alternative. Obviously, you don't want to build new loading docks somewhere, but as far as the dumpsters are concerned, that's my feeling, that we should either take a look at it and see if there's another possibility.
Mr. Scarborough?
Yes, I would hate to be in the dentist chair having surgery and watch a dumpster being emptied.
Well, I think they're on board with the screening.
I think they are.
I think it's the volume
I
that we're concerned
understand,
with.
but I want to voice that opinion.
Okay. Well, a couple people on the board have been quite vocal about this concern and being considerate of the taxpayers. Some people have not voiced their opinion, so we have to figure out where, as a board, we'd like to go. I do want to just express my own sense of trying to wrestle with some of these questions, that already these dumpsters exist, and already the machines come and pick them up and create the siren sound that you're discussing. And already they're in a location where they're heard as equally as an air conditioning unit can be heard. And the discussion, the proposal seems to be to take what must be a problem already and just move it to another location where they already have a loading dock. So I just wanted to make sure we're not thinking that a new problem's going to be created by there being more dumpsters added, but that the same problem that exists now is just being discussed about being put in a different spot, and a spot that already has been built to facilitate that, because the planning board already saw and approved the loading dock concept a year or so ago, whenever this came up before us.
Mr. Chairman, can I just follow up on one thing? The air conditioning unit I'm mentioning is actually on the front side of the building, not the one currently located where you're looking at with the dumpsters. There's another unit towards the Highland Street side of the building. That was the one I was referencing.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ranlett.
Yes.
Being complete.
I'm wondering if we can't have an on-site meeting with the hospital and the planning board to take a look at the situation and, you know, see firsthand exactly what we're looking at. And
would it also give us a better sense of what the implications would be if that area was not turned into a green area and it remained a dumpsters area?
Exactly.
The town planner?
Yeah, also from going out to the site today, the dentist office that's at the corner, they actually have an existing dumpster there that's not screened, and that's a lot closer to Highland Street and Avery Street than the one being proposed. I don't know if they're different sizes, but there is an existing dumpster there at the dentist office. So I just want to bring that to attention just so that we know everything that's existing.
Is there any possible way we could make some kind of restriction as when the dumpster is there? Because I don't think it would be half as irritating at 12 o'clock at noon or 2 o'clock in the afternoon as it would be at 6 o'clock in the morning.
Would the applicant like to respond to that?
Actually, our
Access to
pickups
this
are in
road.
the afternoon currently. Tuesday afternoons.
Well, that sounds like an important piece of information to consider, that this noise that's being produced is going to be done in the afternoon. But the board can... I'd like to ask the applicant what would be the implications of a slight delay if we went for on-site review, on-site visit.
I'm not sure what you mean by slight. I don't think it's problematic. I'm thinking slight's only a few weeks, but maybe to confirm we have the same idea. But
That's what I was thinking.
My only comment is that it appears to me that the hospital is surrounded by neighborhoods. And I'm not sure any side that we choose to put dumpsters is not going to impact somebody.
No screening.
Location where it exists is impacting somebody on Avery Street.
Right.
You had mentioned that you had an alternate or another idea of locating besides where you've decided to put it. You said that there was a second idea, and I was wondering, you know, there was a street to the left of the hospital on the backside. There was a road that used to access up where it's now like cut off. When you're going into the hospital where the
Coming
loading
from
docks are,
Highland Street.
you get on Highland Street and
Yeah.
and then you're going in, and then you got the parking lot on the left-hand side. But there was a road that used to continue down through there. You got something,
Yeah,
maybe?
the extension of the hospital road.
But I didn't know if that might have been an option out there on that end, because...
yeah, that is where our vans come in for mobile nuclear medicine and mobile MRI scanning. So we have big tractor trailers that actually dock to the building there. They're there 2 to 3 days a week. And so they need that entire radius to be able to do their maneuvers.
There's no way of extending that?
The roadways already are on a retaining wall with the neighborhood ground significantly below that.
Mr. Guilfoyle? The original proposal was to have just a chain link fence screening this, and the applicants have agreed to do something much more invisible in terms of trying to obscure it. With that in mind, and hearing that the pickups would be in the afternoon and very infrequently, once a week for recycling and just a few times a year for the compactor, does that allay any of your concerns? Do you feel a little more comfortable, or?
I'll still be opposed, but less opposed.
Okay. Thank you. So we, as a planning board, we are supposed to make decisions and move forward. So we need to decide whether we need to have a site visit of this, or we feel there's enough information in front of us to act either favorably or not. and that we move forward by somebody making a motion on one of those ideas or another.
I would move to accept the motion, or
To make, to accept the application?
accept the act. Yep.
With the two conditions?
With
that
the two conditions.
Planner stipulated.
We accepting or approving?
I'm sorry, did you say approve?
Approve.
Yes. Is there a second for that motion?
Yeah, I'd second it.
Okay, the motion's been moved by Mr. Scarborough and seconded by Mr. Sutcliffe to approve the application as it's been presented to us with the two conditions of having an escrow account for engineering review and that the garbage area be adequately screened. Is there any further discussion on this? All in favor of approving this plan, please raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Opposed? 1. So the application is approved with the two conditions. Thank you.
Bert, could you give me that thing now? Just look at that. Thank you.
All right, moving on to item number 2. Steve Whitman and Paul Phillips of the Energy Committee to discuss a partnership with the Planning Board. If you're two different people, please identify yourselves.
I'm Steve Whitman, and this is Madeline McElhaney, who's also from the Energy Committee.
I'm not Paul today.
Okay, come on.
We're going to have Paul Phillips, who's also on the Energy Committee, wanted to be here tonight, but he had an opportunity to go see Jackson Brown, so he's doing that. He had his priorities.
I thought you were going to say Michael Jackson.
No, not Michael Jackson.
It would be sad if he went off to see Michael Jackson.
So the two of us are here on behalf of the Energy Committee. We're here kind of following up on some conversations that Miriam's had with Ray Gosney, now our chair of the Energy Committee. And Miriam and I had some emails back and forth. And what we really wanted to do was to come and start a conversation between the Energy Committee and the Planning Board. And one of the work items that we identified for ourselves for 2009 was to try to build a partnership with the Planning Board so that all of you would see us as a potential resource if you're working on any plan updates or you're working on regulations, and then to also offer to help draft new regulations or update regulations. And the one that's come to mind already from talking with Miriam is this issue of dark skies, to work on some of the site plan language, to do any of the additional research to kind of help, do some of the running around and give you some additional support if you were to decide to review and adopt a change. So we wanted to come tonight really just to introduce ourselves and to kind of start a conversation. And there are a couple of other things that we'd be happy to talk about, and some of you may have other ideas. One is the possibility of helping prepare an energy chapter for the master plan. When our master plan was completed a couple years ago, energy chapters weren't something that was enabled. And in the last couple of years that we've had an energy committee, we've completed this greenhouse gas inventory, so we have a better idea municipally where we're creating greenhouse gases because we're using a lot of energy. And there are some things that we can do, some of which are already underway, to try to reduce how much energy we use, and as a result, reduce tax dollars. There's a possibility that we'll be able to convince Madeline, as she's finishing up her graduate degree, to work on that. There's a possibility if that doesn't work out, if that project doesn't get approved for her, there's a possibility that the Energy Committee could help do the legwork and work with Miriam and all of you to try to pull together a chapter, because it would be a good thing for us to have as a community. So without going too far, I wanted to just start that way and see if there are some things that the Planning Board has identified as work items, or if other folks have ideas.
Mr. Kelly?
Can I just ask a question? What's going to happen, and I understand it's going to be quite a concern about this new energy lighting that has mercury in it, and it's perfectly okay right now, but in 10 or 15 years from now, all of these light bulbs that are supposed to last for 15 years are going to go kaput. And what's going to happen to all those light bulbs with all their mercury in it.
Sure, you're talking about the compact fluorescents?
Yeah.
Yeah, that concern came to the Energy Committee the first year that we'd been established, and so we did some press with the Record Enterprise and worked with the folks at the transfer station. People are supposed to take those bulbs we can take them here to the Plymouth transfer station where they'll be recycled through the Resource Recovery District, or they can go to Home Depot and some other department stores that will take them and ship them back. It's a very small amount of mercury, but if it's dropped, if a bulb is broken at the end of its useful life or while it's still being used, it's a concern if somebody tried to clean it up with a vacuum or something.
I know. On a personal thing, I have a grandson that knocked over a lamp with one of those, and all Hades broke loose. They had to get him out of the house. They had to take him to the hospital.
Right.
Where a regular light bulb breaks and you sweep it up and you put it in a waste basket and that's it. So it's going to amount to a tremendous amount more expenses as far as the going home, driving 60 miles to get rid of a light bulb, so that people won't be completely look like monsters.
Well, we're fortunate because we can bring it right here to the transfer station. I mean, if you want to chase the mercury issue, if we use older bulbs and burn a lot more fuel, that makes us use a lot more coal, which creates a lot more mercury that way as well. So unfortunately, we're having issues with mercury.
I think the town administrator had a good idea. He says, why don't you turn out half the light bulbs and you save just as much energy.
We could do that.
Mr. Scarborough?
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment. We in our own home have completely switched over to those bulbs.
Right.
And they do not last 7 years. I'm lucky if they last a year. So you're going to have a lot more than would be projected.
The other thing with these new light bulbs is you turn it on, and if you've got 15 minutes to waste, you sit there while it goes, and you stumble over a kid's toy and all this stuff, you know.
I don't know where you guys are getting your light bulbs, but I got this bad.
I got mine, there are 2 spotlights right over the counter in the kitchen, and I have to have another light bulb so I can turn it on. And in that way, wait until that damn thing goes, lights, and finally lights up, and then I can see, and then I turn the other light bulb off.
Well, I don't want to limit our conversation too much, but we're not here for just bulbs. So.
Yes, Mr. Aaron.
What kind of recommendations might you make to an applicant? Because I'm a little concerned that it might cost them more money or maybe a delay in getting their approvals, and I'd be a little concerned about that.
Sure. No, I mean, we haven't even thought that far down the road yet. I'm doing some work like this with planning boards and energy committees and conservation commissions in other parts of the state under contract. And so what we wanted to do is just start a conversation here about what we could offer through our own energy committee for free to the town to get some things done. One of the things that other towns have done is just to look at their existing regulations and think about things that they're requiring that create a more energy consuming situation and try to think about, why did we require this in the first place? Was it to deal with a problem that we had locally, or was it because we copied the ordinance from somewhere else and it really doesn't make sense? So there's kind of auditing of existing regulations to see what makes sense. Whether or not some towns have gone to the extent that you're saying, where they've raised the bar pretty high to say you have to meet these conservation objectives to get your approval. I don't see Plymouth as wanting to go there, but there may be some things we could do to encourage people or suggest that they consider. Simple things like on a site where you have the option, just thinking about the orientation of buildings. A lot of towns in New Hampshire have that within site plan and subdivision. Think about building orientation. So that the applicant can think about passive solar. Whether or not they want to go further than that with their application would be up to them. But
Yes, Mr. Aaron.
I think it's a great idea. I have no problem with it. I'd be a little concerned about saying to the applicant that he needs to go for your review, but I think it's a great idea for you to put maybe a couple of page paper together with some suggestions, energy-minded suggestions, and we could tell an applicant that here's some information. If you'd like some like some on energy conservation, and they can do with it what they would like. And I think that would be a great idea, and that's something you could work on. And
Sure.
And as a volunteer basis, if they want to look at it, it'd be great.
Volunteer, yeah.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to say, look, in order to get your approval,
No.
you got to go with these energy. I don't think that makes any sense.
You're saying you wouldn't want to make any changes to, these wouldn't be Energy Committee regulations, it would be within the existing land use regulations.
Yeah, I'd hate to make any changes to the master plan. Master plan should be a very simple document. I'd hate to start getting into the small details of what you're talking about.
Let's, Mr. Aaron, let's keep a couple issues separated. So making changes to the master plan would be, and versus changing the ordinance versus having another commission make regulations. Those are sort of three different issues. We do require applicants to be dark sky compliant. It probably would be helpful for an applicant to know what that means and have some examples of what it is. Yes. That's not the same thing as another board telling them, you have to do this, but it would be helpful in that way. But if we had a document that we handed out saying, which is your idea, and I think it's brilliant, here are some examples, and we do want it to be dark skies compliant. So know that when you're looking at these examples, that does sort of enable us and the applicant to move through everything in a much more speedy way, without, adding extra expense, because we're not really adding anything there. But it wouldn't take the town to vote on it, or we wouldn't have to put an ordinance in for what the specifications are. The town planner, and then Mr. Kelly.
Yeah, going with that example of dark sky compliant, since I've started working here, I've heard planning boards say, well, it's got to be dark sky compliant, and our site plan regulations already say dark sky compliant, but it doesn't lay out a standard. So, for example, we just had the hospital. He did give us, his light fixtures say they're dark sky compliant. His photometric, some of it really went beyond the 1-foot candle at the property line. I don't have anything that forbids it, so, what exactly am I supposed to do? What I'd like would be to have some kind of standard that says it should not exceed 1-foot candle at the property line, something simple like that. It doesn't really involve anything with cost, it's just using a different kind of fixture. And one thing they have decided with the dark sky compliant is it's much more efficient money-wise, because you're telling your light to go directed down instead of lighting up the sky. So that doesn't help anyone to light up the sky. But I would appreciate some kind of standard, so if they say, hey, it's dark sky compliant, I can say, well, yeah, it is, or no, it's not. It's just the light fixture. Because as I said, he did give me the photometric. Am I supposed to average it and see what the average is, and then, okay, well, it's not more than 1-foot candle by average, or don't exceed this, or whatever. But I want some kind of standard. So with planning board approval, I would like for them to give me some kind of recommendation, because this was something that I was going to go do myself. The second thing that Chairman Krukenberg mentioned tonight was about the landscaping. And I didn't want to mention this in front of everyone, but we don't have anything in landscaping. I don't have that tree list. I mean, I can go online and find something see what the state has, but I would like that in our site plan regulations, to have non-invasive tree list that you mentioned, but we really don't have that in our site plan. So again, with planning board approval, if the Energy Committee is willing to draft some kind of recommended plants, or have a recommended plant list, so that when somebody does present us with plants, we know, okay, this is on our list or it's not, or I can just hand them that list, so that then we don't have a whole discussion about Siberian spruce. But we would know right away what's allowed and what's not. And also, maybe there's some trees that have some kind of energy conservation aspect to them.
So one thing I was going to ask, I mean, it's easy for us to explain to the rest of the Energy Committee why we want to spend some of our time working on the dark sky piece. But with the landscaping piece, if it's simply to come up with a list of native species, it doesn't seem like a good fit for the Energy Committee. If there are other landscaping metrics that you can include, so we could come up with some other ideas for the board to consider.
Right, and
more related to helping the applicant reduce their energy use.
See, and that would be fantastic. And I don't know. I mean, are there some plants that produce more oxygen than others, I don't know, or more energy efficient, or have a shading effect on the building? I plain don't know, but that was something sort of on my to-do list, was to come up with some kind of landscaping plan. And what Mr. Kelly was talking about with bonding, I'm a little uncomfortable right now requiring them to bond it when we don't have it in our site plan regulations that we require you to put any plants in. It's because we don't have a landscape ordinance. I don't know, it seems, I can't speak for what happened with Walmart. I wasn't here, and I don't know the conditions, and I don't know, if that was unique to Walmart. But instead of doing it site by site, saying, okay, you will bond your trees, and I'm putting in 50 trees, and we're only putting in 2 trees, it'd be better if we're all on the same playing field.
Thank you. I think we should keep our discussion probably focused on the energy concerns that are here. Mr. Kelly and then Mr. Scarborough.
I think it's a good idea for the Energy Committee to coordinate between the Planning Board and the committee. I do not like the word partnership, because I think there should be an independent committee that we should be able to ask for our help if we could. The other thing is that I believe it's not the Energy Commission's responsibility to find out a lot of these RSAs and everything like that. I think it's the Planning Board's responsibility to find out whether you should have a 2-watt bulb next to the boundary line instead of that. That has nothing to do with the Energy Commission as far as I'm concerned, or what kind of trees to do or anything like that. I think we should have the availability to call you up and say, gee, we got a set of plans, could you go over them and look at them, and as an independent person, independent committee, come up and tell us what some of your thoughts are as a recommendation. But I find 2 things, that partnerships create enemies, really do. The best way,
yeah, I would hope not. We're here in goodwill.
The best way to, if you have your best friend and you want to get rid of him, create a partnership with him. You know that in business-wise. But as a separate committee, you could give us recommendations as far as that's concerned.
A couple of things that come to mind hearing your comments, Mr. Kelly. Thing number 1 is my day job is with the New Hampshire Sustainable Energy Association, and we're a nonprofit in New Hampshire, and one thing that we do is track legislature in the House and Senate and advocate for renewable energy and energy efficiency in New Hampshire to make it easier for people. So we as the Energy Committee in Plymouth could be a resource for those things. There if you need us, but not going to impose anything upon you. And a second thing that I thought of was just in thinking about an energy plan for the town of Plymouth. I'm working on my master's in environmental science and policy, and would love to have the work that I'm doing help the town that I live in, because for work, I cover all of New Hampshire, but selfishly, I want to help Plymouth the most because it's where I live. And my goal with that is just to provide resources that would help reduce municipal expenses and help us use the resources that we have more efficiently and use less of them.
I really would like that, because Governor Lynch just hauled away about $800,000 away from the town of Plymouth, and as you know, most energy as well as most good food cost a lot more than, at least initially, than the way, the conventional type of doing it. And I know that 20 or 30 years from now, we'll be saying, my God, why didn't we do that? But it's like the stimulus plan. They're going to give a town $1 million, but the town has to give them, has to supply $1 million as a partnership. If the town doesn't have that $1 million, that stimulus plan is not worth a heck of a lot. And it's just like the energy thing. If we've got to raise the taxes in the town of Plymouth because of an energy plan, no matter how good it is, when is it going to be the time that people can't afford to be in Plymouth? And if nobody's in Plymouth, you don't have an energy problem.
And ultimately, if we're using our energy better, our taxes will go down because we're not using as much of it and we don't have those costs. That's the hope.
That's in theory.
Mr. Scarborough?
All I wanted to do was actually tie what Mr. Kelly said and what Ms. Bader said, and ask if it's possible for the committee to provide her with a document that she could hand to individuals who are proposing construction and relative to energy and energy conservation. That's all I had to say.
And would you go so far to say that that could sort of be in 2 tiers?
Yes.
This is what we mean by dark sky, and these are, and then this next tier could be, and if you want to be energy conscious, which might ultimately save you some money, here's some other things to consider?
Yes.
And maybe that's something that would be shared with all of us before
absolutely.
It just went out to the public.
So it sounds like you want some advisory items that you don't want to clarify your site plan regulations related to dark sky?
Say that again?
That you want some advisory information, as Jack said, that could be handed out as voluntary information?
Well, I would think as an advisory, in an advisory capacity, anything you gave the board, that could be helpful, would be helpful. So if you also came up with some other ideas, like this is what an energy section of a master plan looks like. I mean, some people's knee-jerk reaction might be, oh no, that means everybody has to build this way, and other people might say it's just a sort of discusses a spirit of what's involved.
Yeah.
We don't really know until we see it.
An energy chapter, I'm working on one for the city of Berlin right now, and we're working on one for the town of Temple, and only a couple of towns have done them yet in New Hampshire. And the idea is that the same spirit of the master plan chapters you have now that talk about housing or whatever other topic specific to Plymouth. So we have this greenhouse gas inventory that the Energy Committee's done. That's great, but if we don't share it with you and other boards, if people don't know where to look to find it, the information's not very good and it'll be out of date.
Well, it sounds like you're volunteering to do a lot of work we might expect town employees to do. And so if you're going to volunteer it, I think that would be saving the town money, and most people would be in favor of that.
It took a lot of conversation with the Energy Committee for us to decide whether or not we wanted to extend this. We did want to start a partnership, a healthy, friendly partnership.
They all start that way.
This is a tremendous volunteer effort. And if Madeline's involved, it's going to be a tremendous amount of effort on her part to pull something together. At the end of the day, you guys are the ones that get to decide if you want to change what's in there, or if you want to pull things out, or if you want to adopt it. We don't have that power at all, but we're offering that as one town committee to a town board. So,
well, the Conservation Committee has given us maps in terms of the way the environment looks like, so this greenhouse discussion might be interesting for us to look at.
Sure.
That's why I think an independently committee is better than a partnership committee, because a partnership, at least in my idea of it, is that they are coming into the planning board as a partner, and I think we have to be an independent board. If they want to go as an independent consultant that draws up something and gives it to Marion as a suggestion, I think Mike's idea is super. I think it's a good idea for them to come up, but I find that, especially with municipalities, that all of a sudden that partnership becomes more and more integrated with the board, and finally we're having to accept a lot of energy items that may be are wonderful ideas but are not feasible.
Would it be fair for me to characterize that Mr. Kelly's discussion, vision of your serving as an advisory capacity fits with your idea of working with the board as a partner?
Yeah, we just don't want to work in a bubble without your input, because it could waste a lot of our time if we're going in a direction that you don't feel is suitable for the town. So we want it to be, at least there to be some feedback loop.
Or maybe there should be some baby steps so that you don't go spend 3 years doing this and then
That's all.
drop it. Yeah.
And I think, your study on what we can do in the town to save energy would be really great from, strictly objective standpoint. To have another side of the exploration, because she has expertise and she's working in other areas and other people do other things. So there's open communication, there's open ideas. If it works here, it could work here, it could save money, it could
It sounds like you're getting a lot of positive response.
Could I ask a question as far as this dark sky issue is concerned? Are you indicating that you want a more strict dark sky regulation than the state? I know. Like
we haven't asked for anything.
I know with the Baker River, the town can give more stringent footage from the river and everything. And my idea of that is, do you think the town of Plymouth needs a more strict regulation on dark sky, or more, or less? Or do you think the state should be able to regulate that so that dark sky issue sort of vanishes as far as we are concerned?
Well, the state's not likely to regulate it. They've empowered us to regulate it through the statute, that towns can regulate it, according to the House bill that was signed. We don't have an opinion because we haven't talked about it or done any research on it for the town as of yet. All I know is from what Miriam shared that there aren't a lot of guidelines in your existing regulations, so it leaves her at a loss when dealing with an applicant.
But there's new regulation that the governor signed does give some teeth to it, right? So it does give the town...
House Bill 585?
It does give the town some guidelines as to what they need and don't need, right?
Yeah, and we can look at that.
And one thing that we could help with as the Town Energy Committee is to summarize those guidelines so that when you're in your planning process, you can just say, well, this, and this is what the state says.
And I think as far as working together, on a regular basis, you could come before the board just like you're doing right now and, present some of this information. We could take a look at it and present it to Miriam. And
if it would be helpful, I mean, that's the type of thing that we'd like to do.
Most definitely be helpful.
We're not looking for extra night meetings, but we're happy to do them.
Right.
Mr. Ahern?
When an applicant comes to the board, we have some pretty good-sized applicants like Walmart, where they have a lot of engineers that can do all the studies and the percentages and the amount of light illumination. And a lot of times we'll have a smaller applicant doing a plaza or a small plaza, and they probably don't want to go out and hire the engineers to do these types of studies to fall within guidelines of an energy guideline.
Right.
So whatever you're putting together, if there can be some simple things that a layperson could understand,
right?
They say, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. That will save us some money. Let's make sure we put that into our plan. That's great, as long as they don't have to go out and hire these experts.
Sure.
That would add to their cost.
Okay. That's a good recommendation.
Simple.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
Do you feel as a committee that you need to come back from this meeting with a motion that says, we're so glad you came and we look forward to you coming again?
There was a great group hug at the end. No, I guess as long as we're clear on what to report to the Energy Committee next week, it sounds like we can prepare some information related to dark skies. It sounds like there's support for any other kind of voluntary information that could be available to an applicant when they meet with Miriam. And I'm a little fuzzy on the energy chapter, but it sounds like if we were to draft an energy chapter and present it through Miriam to the board, that you'd take a look at it and give us some feedback. But is that accurate?
Probably with also an explanation of why it'd be important to have this added to our master plan.
Sure.
If the theory is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. So why would we want to add this?
Maybe we want to do that first before we spend months work drafting the chapter.
Exactly.
I'd be happy to come back at another meeting and give a short presentation on things that I was hoping to include in this energy chapter, just to kind of gain an understanding.
That would be helpful. That would really shed a light on what the chapter would be.
And I think also with the dark skies compliance, I think the question Mr. Kelly raised is really important.
Yep.
How does what your proposal fit in with what's going on in the state? A nice little summary of what's going on there. Town planner?
Yeah, also the offer they had to look at our site plan regulations, look at that ordinance, and make suggestions. Maybe we have something in there that we don't need. So I would like approval to give them a copy of our site plan regulations so that Madeline can look at it and say, oh, you guys don't need this, or you might want to just clarify this part. And just as a matter of a recommendation to bring before the planning board, not any kind of, this is the way we're going to do it, but just, this is their recommendations, or this is where they saw deficiencies.
Does anyone want to tell the town planner not to give this advisory board the
I make a motion
copy?
that they give Miriam.
Okay.
Everybody's taking it?
Second?
A motion made by Ms. Bishop and seconded by Mr. Scarborough. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. You have your resounding vote of confidence.
Thank you. Thanks for putting us on the agenda tonight.
No one's going to do anything.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, and just know that if anything does come up, feel free to reach out to the Energy Committee, and if we can point you to a resource, or if we have anything we can share, we're happy to do that.
Okay, and if you guys can just stay till the end so that I can just give you a copy while you're here? Okay.
Sure. Do that.
Great. I think we're close to the end, so
Okay.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 7, unfinished and other business. Is there any?
I have none.
Okay, item number 8, public comments. Are there any comments from the public?
My name is Frank Miller. As far as the previous conversation here about energy, there is a lot of scientific research. You were asking about landscaping and what value landscaping has. There's a lot of research done by various universities on noise abatement, wind control, and energy, and it's used extensively in airports. The other thing on lighting, there's 2 industries that inherently, by design, require lighting to go past the boundary lines. Airports being one of them. Minimum requirement for visibility is 17,000 feet, which is about 3 miles, a little bit past the boundary lines. Same thing with advertisement. So it's just an overview thought that we don't get too specific about that one candle power in an ordinance, because you might want to look at all of the industries and their technical requirements. It's a little balancing act there. But there's a lot of research that's available, so you don't have to, it's really available. The other one in particular with this committee that we have already had questions about for the planning board, it's in our regulation, is the alternative energy accessories. Okay, so when you have an impact on a neighborhood by somebody putting up a heat exchanger, a solar panel, either freestanding or part of their extension of their house, there are court cases dealing with the visual effect and effect that might have on a neighbor's solar event. There's also questions and concerns that we've already talked about here in town about people coming into the planning board to request putting something up on their roof or out in their front yard for heating hot water or generated electricity. Those, I think we need, there's a lot of new technology. There's a lot of towns that are out of state that have unique ordinances as a result of, and I'll give you an example, when everybody came up with the new form of television receivers, and everybody put one on their roof, and the town, it really started to look tacky because everybody had these big dishes up on their roof. So they came up with new ordinances dealing with dishes. That's something that it's it's a thought of the planning board when you change the character, or do we want to devalue the character, the look? But in dealing with the energy, the big push would be people to think about putting up some accessory for alternative energy on or near their house that may affect the visual impact of the neighborhood. That's already in our zoning ordinance. That's just a thought.
Thank you. The last item on our agenda is adjournment. If there's
Make a motion.
So moved.
We're adjourned. We're walking out of here. It is 7:50.
Save money, that's something.